right, hello and welcome, class number 2, Requisites to Enlightenment. Let's see, Requisites of Enlightenment, it is a cluster of 37 teachings, or 37 clusters of teachings that the Buddha has set aside as having a particularly um, a poignant relationship with each other, as they all point towards the awakening, point towards enlightenment, point towards whatever word it is that you would like to put to that experience there. Um, Within the suttas and such, early Buddhist writings, the early Buddhist teachings, there are a lot of different teachings oriented towards different ways. Some are more towards the ethics and such, a lot of the rules of the community of monastics in order to cultivate harmony within the community. Some are taught towards, all different things, all different types of behavior and ways of being. But this 30, but the requisites of enlightenment, um, they all share in it the underlying idea of practice this if you want to move towards awakening, towards liberation. And there's a quote that's attributed to the Buddha that there are two mistakes we can make on the path. Number one, not starting it. Number two, not completing it. So I find that uh, um, teachings to, how should we say, best represent the aims, objectives, and goals of the Dharma that the Buddha put out should be taken as liberation, liberation oriented. So I'm a liberation oriented teacher. This is my focus, looking squarely at the experience of suffering or dukkha and how it is that we can shift our relationship with that so that we can move towards waking up. So, having said that, let's get into it. Let me do a little screen share here, and we will jump on in. All righty, here we go. Requisites to Enlightenment. This is number 2 of 6. You can see that right there. Class number 2, the 4 great efforts. I took it upon myself to refer to Ledi Sayadaw's writing of the same name, from Manual of Requisites to the Enlightenment. It's his own commentary on this particular cluster of teachings. Ledi Sayadaw was a Vipassana teacher. He was a monastic, Burmese monastic. Let's see, late 1800s to into the early 1900s there. It was an interesting time then where in Buddhism, a lot of the meditation practices actually just fell to the wayside. People stopped practicing on the cushion, so to speak. And a handful of monks took it upon themselves to go back to the suttas, go back to the commentaries, and piece back together a lot of the meditation practices. So Ledi Sayadaw was one of the initial grand poobahs of that effort, and pretty much in many ways, in particular, revived the Vipassana practice, which had fallen into complete obscurity. So his work is greatly valued. So I'm citing and referencing a bit of his work for this series in particular. So as he writes in his book there, the habitual karma of repeated efforts at mental development is a powerful karma. So karma, action. So the act of having repeated effort towards one's development, it's powerful. If we do something over and over again, that, how shall we say, inclines us to do it again. So that can be powerful, both positively as well as negatively. If we are engaging in some sort of ethical behavior, or we are aiming ourselves towards growing in a particular way, it's a numbers game. A repetition of effort over time will yield results in that direction of growth. Conversely, If we are allowing ourselves to go unconscious and fall prey to unwholesome ideas, concepts, impulses, that sort of action repeated over time leads results in that direction as well. So that idea of karma, that idea of action, what is it that we are doing, that we're engaging in, that makes profound effect on what we become. So keeping that in mind, let's go into this whole idea of the four great efforts. So according to Lady said, I'm going to read from quote here. Let all therefore acquire the eye of wisdom and be aware of the danger of not making effort. There are four kinds of right effort. Number one, the effort to overcome or reject evil, unwholesome states that have arisen or are in the course of arising. Number two, the effort to avoid, not only in this life, but also in the lives that follow, the arising of unwholesome states that have yet arisen. Number three, the effort to arouse the arising of wholesome states that have not yet arisen. Number four, the effort to increase and to perpetuate the wholesome states that have arisen or are in the course of arising. Okay, so just like a lot of early Buddhist literature, kind of dry, semi-repetitious. I think that what he said could be also be very well done in an infographic. So let's look at what he said there. The four right exertions, the four right efforts. Sometimes it's translated variously. So here we have on this side, unwholesome states of mind, states of mind that are craving based, states of mind that are aversion, hatred based, states of mind that are delusional, dissociative, blanking out. We're all familiar with that. When we start kind of, well, indulging in some of the lesser unethical content of mind, okay? Compared to the wholesome states of mind, the kindness, compassion, generosity, things that we would like to cultivate that, how shall we say, lend themselves to our betterment, to our improvement. So moment by moment, he's looking at these states of mind, and really, let's say states of mind and heart, because these can also be experienced primarily in the body without content of thought. So we have unwholesome material, we have wholesome material. So let's look at the unwholesome. If it's unarisen, let's just say we have a particular tendency towards aversion. I have an anger habit. I'm just an angry person. Or let's just say I have a particular craving-based habit. I have a particular craving for some substance or process addiction that, it's there. There's a latent tendency. Right now, I'm not feeling it. I'm perfectly fine. I'm not feeling agitated. So it's unarisen. That tendency is unarisen. How shall I relate to it? Prevent it. Meaning, don't go looking for it. If there ain't no trouble going on in the mind and body, don't start cooking around and looking for trouble. Yeah. How can we prevent the unethical states of mind and body from arising? Is what he's saying, or what is how it's presented in the Dharma. Now, then, if it has arisen, if I am flushed with an anger or rage, if I'm flushed and fully overwhelmed with craving, and I'm feeling the compulsivity in order to indulge, what do I do with that? It's arisen, an unwholesome state has arisen. Well, the adage is, or the advice is, to abandon. How can I just let go of that, as opposed to following through? As opposed to following through on that action or following through on engaging in that. Because the more that I'm repeating that, I mean, it's just science. What's the adage? The neurons that fire together wire together. The more that I have a particular mental, emotional state that leads to a behavior, there's a whole sequencing of neural pathways that are involved in that. The more that I engage in that, the stronger that neural network becomes. Yeah. So this is how habits form, be they positive habits or negative habits. Conversely, or on the other side, wholesome states of mind. Well, if I'm hanging out, I'm kind of meh, I'm kind of slothful and restless and agitated, and I'm just kind of being aware of this mind body experience. I got no positive states going on. Well, how can I arouse it? How can I cultivate a sense of kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, equanimity? How can I arouse or cultivate states of mindfulness, of states of wisdom in order to better be with this experience? Yeah. So, yes, go looking for that. How can we cultivate that? And if it is risen, I'm sitting here and I'm being aware of the general state of my mind and body. And there's a little bit of equanimity, there's a little bit of calm, there's a little bit of joy. Okay, good. How can I continue to maintain that? How can I relate to it in a way where that also shows up in the next minute and the next moment? Yeah. So this is pretty much essentially the four great efforts. And I said to myself, wow, I'll just show the infographic and that's great. There's nothing more to the class. Howsoever, it gets a little deeper. Um, so here we go. If we're to go a little bit further into the unarisen, the unwholesome, or the unwholesome, be it unarisen or arisen, what we're looking at here is not just the sense of like, all right, I got a bad habit. When I'm nervous, I bite my nails, and boy, that messes up the cuticles, and God, that hurts. It's not that simple. It can be, but really, what they're looking at is the personality view. Yeah, how is it that these states lead to a personality view? So sometimes it's translated as, well, wrong view. Yeah. Wrong view. It's not necessarily just believing in bad ideas. Wrong view in Buddhism doesn't necessarily say, hey, yes, I'm a flat earther. No, it's not holding on to clusters of ideas that are factually false, but wrong view, and in this case, how it pertains to personality view, it's a false interpretation of our momentary thoughts, feelings, and sensations that become a locus of our self-identification. Yeah, I'm over here, I'm particularly fine, nothing's happening. I hear a particular word, somebody calls something out. It, as I turn my attention towards it, I'm feeling this aversive reaction, this defensiveness. Now I can't let go of that. Whatever calm, peaceful abiding I was having in the moment before is now gone, as all of my attention and energy shifts towards and just wraps around this angry, frustrated defensiveness. And now here I am in this broiling uh, um, state of unpleasantness, state of distress. Yeah.
I
So
have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, you're what you're describing is kind of like the thing eats you, right? Like it devours you.
Mm-hmm.
But um, I'm wondering if the other states, like the higher states, devour you as well. Like, is it the same kind of thing? Like,
Well, I guess let me ask
how
you, what
can
do
I
you mean
put
by
it?
devour then?
Um, well, it looks like it takes all of you. You concentrate totally on that thing that you want, that thing that you desire, and that like takes you away from you.
Yes.
Um, and what my question is are the like the higher states, for calling them like something,
Uh-huh.
do they do the same thing? Do they work like in the same way?
Well, I think if I understand your question correctly, these lower states, they have a way of taking our sense of agency, our sense of choice away from us as we kind of just get gripped by it, and it holds us. And it's like we go on this automatic autopilot until this emotion, this compulsion, this obsession is through with us. As opposed to, in contrast, some of the more positive states, there's something that can be felt, but there's not that autopilot, automatic going unconscious to it. Instead, there's more of this kind of higher refined mindfulness and awareness. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, that's the differentiation that I would make. When we fall prey to habitually going unconscious to these repetitive patterns of distress and dismay, yeah, it's like we become a zombie to it. Yeah. Versus when we're cultivating some of these positive states, we keep our, we keep our prefrontal cortex online. We have much more of awareness of what's going on and a sense of choice within that experience. Is that close to what you're asking there?
Yeah. Now I have another question. Like, I'm looking for the word, but they're the same. Like, they're the same thing, right? Like, if you, well, not the same thing. Like um, it's the same impulse, isn't it? Like the thing that comes to you and says like, oh, you want this, and then like it's the same thing in the outside world, but it's how you react to it, isn't it? Like,
It's
is that what?
how we react to it. There's something, yes, about our response. And we'll definitely be going into kind of how is it that we can be more mindful of how it is that we're responding to what's coming at us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that kind of getting close to it? Maybe that might make a little bit more sense. And when I start to look specifically at how we respond, and maybe I'll circle back around to that second part of that question. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Okay, so right now what we're talking about is, yeah, being gripped by that, being devoured, to use your terminology there. So it's a state of being where we're believing what is true due to not seeing clearly the suffering state, the underlying suffering that's going on. So it pertains to rebirth in the Dharma. And the way that I like to have that conversation is kind of the psychological, emotional rebirth. This idea of, yes, I am me. I've had the same social security number all throughout my life. Howsoever, when we really look at who's driving this thing, there's definitely a committee. When I am relaxed and mellow, I have one particular outlook of the world and a particular set of tools that are available in a way that I respond. When I'm completely overwhelmed, there's a whole different me that shows up that might not have access to certain tools, that has a very different view of what the world is and what my means are to, get what I need to get. So this rebirth is like, well, who's driving the show now inside of us? What personality structure is showing up that's driving right now? So that's the idea of the rebirth. Like, how is it that I'm responding to this moment that's inclining the next version of me to show up, whether it's one that's more suffering oriented or one that's more liberation oriented? Yeah. So the mood, the ego states that underlie addictive behaviors, compulsiveness, reactivity in general. So this is the idea of dukkha as self. So dukkha is that term in Pali term, often translated as suffering. It means anything from the disappointment, distress, um, just that gap between how I like things to be and how they are, and what happens in that gap there. Okay, so the context. This is an analogy that Letty Sayadaw talks about that I think is rather poignant. He talks about like a match having three types of fire to it. There's the type of fire that is latent within the match. The match is not struck yet. Let's pretend this is a match, but there's the potential of fire in it. So if I want fire, I reach for the match. The match itself isn't a flame yet, but it holds the potential for fire. Yeah. So there's the latent fire that's within the match. Then there's the match that happens when there's the fire that happens when the match is struck. And then the fire ignites and it's happening. Yeah. And then there's the other type of fire is, well, now I have that flame going here. Well, let's light something up else with it, whether it's the wick of the candle, a cigarette, my house. There's the fire that gets transferred on. So he's using this as there's the latent fire of the match, but that refers to what's latent within us. I have my own potential for craving, aversion, and unconsciousness, Right now, it's not being triggered. So it's kind of harmless, but I have to recognize that it's there. So that latent dukkha, or these latent hindrances, they're harmless presently if they're not being contacted or initiated, ignited. Yeah. So now then the fire, the match strikes and then it lights. That talks about, these tendencies that happen when they're contacted. Oh, I hear that particular sound, or I'm recalling that particular memory, or I'm seeing that thing out there. Boom, it's contacting something. It's pulling something up out of me. Yeah. So I'm contacting a particular stimuli and that tendency is coming up. Yeah. So let's just say it's some sort of dukkha oriented tendency, an aversive tendency or a craving based tendency. If I can see it clearly for what it is, oh, that's a habit pattern. That's just that thought. That's what it is. That's not me. Um, then it can return back to the latent stage. It's just like, oh, that's a thought. And there it goes. Oh, there's a feeling. And there it goes. Yeah. It doesn't build into something. But if we don't see it clearly, then it's something that can churn around in our mind and heart. So Letty Sayadaw talks about the latent stage and then the obsessive stage, where it's arising in the mind and body. That's the obsessive stage, is how he translates it. So what do we do with that? And then there's the fire that ignites the other fire. That's the transgression stage. Let's just say that craving, that aversion, that unconsciousness has showed up in me, and now it shows up in my behavior. Now I say that thing that hurts somebody, or I do that thing that now creates another round of suffering for myself or others. Yeah. So let's look at this. We're looking at kind of the unwholesome, the unethical, the ways that it shows up. There's latent, it's ignited and it's there, and then we're kind of obsessing over it, and then boom, we act. So there's the latent, the obsessive, and the transgressive stage. So quoting from him, he says, the task of extinguishing the unwholesome acts, arisen and unarisen, consists of ridding oneself of personality view and no more. If personality view is uprooted, the two types of unwholesome karma are entirely extinguished. Okay, so the personality view, so there's that sense of self that happens, that's based on that uprising of that craving or aversion that happens. I'm using those terms. Those are the, when we look at the classical early Buddhist hindrances, there's the craving, the suffering based on I want. There's aversion, the suffering based on I hate that, I don't want it. Then there's, I like to say unconscious, because it's the particular giving up of driving of the wheel and going on autopilot, and then the habits take over. I like to interpret that way because, well, the other interpretation is literally lethargy and sloth. I'm meditating and I'm falling asleep. So there's that there, but I like to extend it a little bit, but also include this kind of dissociative quality. So craving, aversion, unconsciousness, restlessness, or this agitated anxiety response, or doubt, just overcome with doubt, overwhelmed with this sense of just not really being able to. So the restlessness and doubt, we can make an argument that's kind of more like the anxiety, depressive views and tendencies that we can have. Yeah. So what he's saying is, if we can look at this personality view and give up that personality view, yeah, then we're letting go of the two types of unwholesome, the arisen and the non-arisen. So what does that mean, giving up the personality view? So anatta, there's that term, not self. Yeah. So I'm one moment having this like argument with this person, and we're getting into this physical altercation, but then it's just like, oh, I step back and it's like, no, this is just a fantasy. This is just a angry, violent fantasy that I'm having right now. Oh, that's, if I walk back on that, oh, that's based on because there's this guy that rides his motorcycle up and down the street really fast, even though the kids in the neighborhood would like to play in the street, but they're not doing it anymore because it's unsafe. And I hear that guy's motorcycle. I see him having a confrontation. Confrontation escalates. And then, we're in the middle of like a Bruce Lee movie. So it's that sense of, we've all had that experience where we'll get into some kind of argument in our own mind, but in the moment, it's real. The blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up, the emotions are real. So if we can have that moment of, oh, okay, this is just a thought. I'm just tripping right here. And this is the sensation in the body, and I can be with it. I can see it's not true. It's not really me. Then we can let go of it. The anatta, the not self. I'm no longer identifying with that. Yeah. And then he's talking about sunyata, or emptiness. How is it that we can empty out of that personality view that's based on that clinging, that wanting to grasp on and ignite that particular hindrance that then turns into a whole personality view. So he talks about in ways where we're just hanging out, abiding in the aggregates. That is to say, I'm just hanging out in mind and body, moment by moment, just noting the arising and the passing of my sensory experience, not needing to fixate on any of them. Yeah. So this is how we relinquish, we let go of. So that was the unarisen and arisen of the unwholesome states. So let's look at the wholesome. Yeah. So wholesome states. So these are the more ethical ways of being, and also the mental factors to cultivate to incline us towards awakening. So, we can look at it in terms of practicing the three trainings. In early Buddhism, there's the formulation of the Eightfold Path in the three trainings model. That's one that I go back to often. And this will actually be one of the more explicit teachings that we're going to do later on. So I won't go too into it right now. But the teachings of Sila, Samadhi, and Panna. Sila, start off with that. That's the ethical training. How is it that we can cultivate our way of being in the world, where we are not adding to the chaos in the world, as I've heard some groups of people say. So, 5 precepts: refrain from taking of life, refrain from taking what is not given freely, refrain from misuse of the senses, not having too much sensual pleasure. I think that's kind of a reformulation. I think earlier on, it was a lot more explicitly about refraining from sexual harm. Yeah. So how is it that our sexual behavior may be causing harm to others and or ourselves? But now I think that, here in this formulation, it's been expanded to just the senses, all of the senses. How is it that we may be causing harm by overstimulation? Yeah. Refraining from wrong speech, refraining from intoxicants that befuddle and cloud the mind. So that's the basic 5 precepts, and that's something that we can find all of that in a lot of the different ethical, the Golden Rule, the 10 Commandments. We can probably find these in all the seed of all different religious ethical systems. But this works at the transgressional level. We follow some precept, we follow some ethical guideline. And again, that the sense of the match, there's the latent, the obsessive, and then the transgressional. The precepts is like, I'm just keeping my hands in my pockets and I'm behaving myself. I'm not going to go out messing anything up. So the Sila works on that transgressional level. So the Sila, or the ethics, and then Samadhi, which is the meditative practices. So here's the thing, all of these things I'm looking at, well, if I'm not going to say anything harmful, I got to watch what I say. If I'm not going to do anything harmful, I kind of watch the impulses going on. So it inclines us to start to go inside and to look at what's there. What are our motivations? So this then moves into, the meditative practices. So Samadhi, the meditative practices working on that obsessive level. So latent obsessive transgression. It's inside of us. Oh, it's ignited. Boom, now we act on it. So the precepts are helping to kind of refrain from a lot of the acting out inappropriately. But then the meditative practices, well, that's when we're really, I don't think I like the term obsessive. When I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's fine. But more like the ruminative level. I think that's probably a better way of saying I'm ruminating on it. So in the Eightfold Path, in the 3 trainings model of the Eightfold Path, right effort, which we are looking at today, is clustered together with concentration and mindfulness. So the concentration, mindfulness, and right effort, they come together as three ways, or the three path factors that are about samadhi, or the meditative practices. So concentration, mindfulness, and effort. In the book here, Ledi Sayadaw says about concentration, samadhi, can destroy wrong view on the plane of mental obsession. This means that if attention to meditative practices is firmly established, upheavals in thought cannot occur. So if I'm truly have my capacity for paying attention, holding my attention on what I deem relevant to the exclusion of what is irrelevant, if I'm able to have this sustained concentration in daily life, if I'm able to have a more sustained concentration in a formal sitting practice, then that's a tool to really see what is going on. So that's aided by mindfulness. So we were talking about that last week, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. I'm directing that concentration towards observing the latent, obsessive, unwholesome that arises within body, that rises in response to the feeling tone, that occurs in the mind, the particular flavors of the dhammas or the various mental factors. I can apply that concentration so I can see how these things can potentially arise. And of course, it's clustered with effort because, well, that gives us the directive. Oh, okay, we got the unwholesome, let's let go of that. Oh, we got the wholesome, great. Let's just continue to cultivate that. And so that's kind of the path right there: concentration, mindfulness, and effort working together. That's what leads us to wisdom. So that 3 trainings, there's the ethics, sila, samadhi, the meditative practices, that leads us to wisdom. So we can have that deep insight as to, oh, this is what's happening. That is not necessarily self. That is not necessarily true. I can let go of that. So here he says, wisdom destroys wrong view on the latent plane. So the sila acts on that level of transgression, on my actions. Then the samadhi, those meditative practices, they work on that level of the ruminative. Oh, it's happening in the mind and body. I kind of see it for what it is, and I can kind of let go. So the wisdom, the insight that then ultimately is cultivated, that works on the latent level, really at the seeds of these things that are inside of us. So wisdom destroys wrong view on the latent plane. That means that if insight is obtained into the entire personality as a mere group of mind and matter, which is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self, then the latent store of wrong view that may manifest itself in the wrong notion of a person, living being, permanent, pleasant, and self will disappear. So let's just say I have a particular craving that arises and it says, oh, this is good, let's do that more. There's a sense of enjoyment in it, but actually it's something that's leading to more distress. If I'm having that sufficient mindfulness, concentration, and right effort, I could see, oh yeah, okay, that seems sweet on the front end, but boy, that's actually quite poisonous. And I can really let go of it as it's just in that first stage of showing itself. Conversely, oh, here there's some sort of mindfulness, there's some sort of equanimity, there's some sort of metta or kindness arising. Oh, I can see that for what it is. Can I just pour some water on those seeds to let that flower and come forth? So that deep wisdom, that's what helps on that latent stage. So this is what I'd like to do in the meditation practice this evening. So we're working on the latent, obsessive, or ruminative level of the unwholesome. So here it is. Things come at us. And I think this is maybe what you were asking about earlier. Things are coming at us in life. Some of them are pleasant. Some of them are unpleasant. Some of it is neutral. So how are we responding to it? So this is part of the 4 foundations. This is literally feel tone. We were looking at that a little bit last week. So feeling tone. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, moment by moment. The mind is assessing the sensory stimulus as it comes in. That's pleasant, that's neutral, unpleasant. Everything that we're noticing, there's right on the heel of that, we notice it's pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or the mind notices that automatically. So what does that lead to?
What my question was like, it's everything a potential for any of them? Like, everything, like every phenomena that is around us is a potential for um, the things that we need to maintain and the things that we need to keep away. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like if I, for example, I have a cigarette and I want to lit it. If I do, then I'm like not taking care of my body, right? So that is wrong. So, but if I don't, then I am working towards that path of taking care of it, right? So it's the same phenomena. It goes like both ways, right?
Yes, yes. So anything that arises in our awareness is potentially subject to craving, aversion, unconsciousness. It is also potentially subject towards kind of liberation as well, all depending on how we relate to it. So there's that sense of kind of, oh, I got the cigarette, I light it. Okay, I'm reinforcing that habit of smoking and the deterioration and the ill health that comes with it. If that's, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I choose to not light it, and then, oh, okay, now I'm dealing with the nick fit and I'm dealing with that craving, right? Can I just deal with it on the level of craving and just kind of work through that so that that craving is less inclined to arise as strongly again? Now I'm shifting that relationship to that particular unpleasant feeling so that it inclines me towards kind of the liberation of that impulse. Yeah, so whatever comes to us is subject to potential reinforcing of suffering or liberation, all in that relationship. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's the good question there.
So, Michael,
Yeah, Jerry.
when we're defining wholesome and unwholesome, right? Unwholesome would lead to suffering, and wholesome is what will lead to awakening. Is that the definition we're using?
Yeah, lead to awakening or increase just well-being as well. Yeah. So let's just say, I'm cultivating metta, a sense of kindness. Maybe that's not in and of itself sufficient for awakening to happen, but it's definitely like in the neighborhood of. So it's moving us towards well-being, towards releasing, relinquishing tendencies of suffering, for sure. Good question, Jerry.
But Mike, we don't. My question also to dovetail that, we don't want to turn away from the unwholesome thoughts completely with regards to like rejecting it outright. Yeah, it's like I'm trying to. I mean, we don't want to roll around in it, obviously, and we want to, encourage the positive feel tones and the wholesome, line of thinking. But yeah, I find myself getting tripped up on like, oh, how I want to gently reject the unwholesome with equanimity. Yeah. Because otherwise I notice in my own practice, if I just try to drop it, dog with a bone, it'll just come up even, that'll just fuel it almost. And it's having like an adverse reaction.
So how can we do that really mindfully, skillfully, so that we're not just kind of dropping it in a way that'll come back stronger, or that we're not just practicing suppression? It's like we have to see things clearly for what they are, and be able to have that right response for it, to see for what it is. So, I mean, there's that idea of the baby learns to not touch fire. The baby sees the flame, says, oh, that's pretty, I want to touch it. Ow, I burned myself. I've now learned I'm never going to stick my hand in fire again. That's how the baby learned, by directly experiencing the suffering of that. The problem is so many of the unethical impulses, it's not like that. The beneficial part is so great on the front end, and then we go unconscious to it, and then we're not really consciously awake to really fully understand or appreciate the suffering on the back end, or we don't really put the two and two together. So it's just like if I'm having an argument with somebody, and then there's something really tempting and feels good about, righteous anger, oh, the world is black and white and I see clearly these people are wrong, and what they're saying and doing is screaming to heaven for karmic retribution. There's a certain kind of joy in reifying that angry persona. But then afterwards, it's just like, well, yeah, there might be a hangover of like, oh God, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. But it's like in the moment where it's happening and I'm engaging in the behavior, I'm just only aware of the joy of the reifying that particular personality state. So how is it that we can be perfectly awake in the arising of the impulse? And it's like, okay, I can see that and I can feel it through. Just allow it to rise and fall without needing to kind of grasp at it and then build this whole structure of self around it. You know? So that this is where the anatta piece comes in. I can see it, I can be with it, allow it to be there as long as it needs to, but not necessarily identify with that. I don't know if that relates, Nicole, to what you were saying.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's just kind of, writing out the storm.
Riding out the storm.
So.
And how can we relate to that storm in a way where we're able to engender more, self-compassion towards the pain? And so let's go back into that there.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
So pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. All of these things are coming at us. The pleasant, oh, there's the cigarette and it just wants to be lit. Oh, here's the aversion. Oh, that guy is doing that thing and it gets me so angry. Here's the unconscious. I'm walking down this hall for the 1000th time during, COVID, staying in my home. I'm going unconscious. I'm going on autopilot. Yeah. So the craving, the pleasant, the unpleasant, the neutral is constantly happening. How do we respond to it? So down here at the bottom, this is kind of how the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral can lead to the craving. The pleasant, oh, it's craving. I want more of that. The neutral, oh, it's neutral. I don't have to pay attention. I go unconscious. There's the unpleasant, oh, I don't like that. That cultivates aversion. Yeah. So the idea is, how can we have anatta? How can we break our identification with those impulses and just stick with that's pleasant. I can just hang out with pleasant, not need to go into craving. That's unpleasant. I don't need to go into a whole story, song, and dance drama about it. It's just, you know what, this is an unpleasant moment. Yeah. So not necessarily building a self on it. On this other side, metta towards field tone, something's pleasant. Well, how can I allow that to just, there's an appreciative joy in that. I can honestly see what I can appreciate in that and just allow myself to feel the pleasantness of that, in a wholesome way. If it's unpleasant, oh boy, there's that sound again. Guy, the leaf blower is right by my ear. That is so unpleasant. Just my whole nervous system is just, I feel like I'm sticking my finger in an electrical socket. Okay, well, can I just bring some compassion, this capacity of compassion towards the unpleasant? So I can just really recognize this is pain, and I can bring some compassion towards that. And unconscious, all right, this is just a moment where nothing's happening. I can accept it. Can I have equanimity with it? Can I not need to go unconscious, not need to turn things up to 11 where I need to seek more stimulation? Can I just be with the neutral? So in this way, yeah, these things are coming at us, the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, but can they become seeds to cultivate an appreciative joy, a compassion, and equanimity? Yeah. So this is what we're trying to arouse and maintain in response. So this is the response. This is how we are responding to the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral in each moment. So I think this is the exercise that I would like to do for our meditation this evening. So based on piggybacking off of the 4 Foundations work last week, we're going to work a little bit more exclusively with the field tone and just examine our response. What is our response to the field tone? Yeah, sound good? All right, allow yourself to come to a comfortable upright position. Allow yourself to straighten up and settle in. Settling into the body, settling into your posture. You find a sense of reasonable comfort in posture. Attempt to maintain an intention to hold stillness. And settling into body, we can also settle into awareness itself. Just contacting that sense of brightness, aliveness in the mind and body. And just allow yourself to settle into that. We'll take a few moments to cultivate a shamatha, a calming of mind, before we go into the exercise. So bring your attention to a part of the body that actively engages in breath, be that the nose, throat, lungs, or belly, and anchor your attention here. So, right from the get go, there's a particular feel tone. Let's incline ourselves to notice what's the pleasant feel tone related to breath. On the in breath, what is pleasant about that? Can you discern what's pleasant about it? Give yourself permission to feel that on the in breath and the top of the in breath. Be that a particular joyful quality, a fullness, a particular flavor of energy. Just discern it, notice it, give yourself permission to feel it. That permission to feel and appreciate it. And so right from the beginning, we notice the feel tone of the pleasant, and we're choosing to lean into the appreciative joy quality, allowing yourself to feel what is pleasant in a way that we're deriving a sense of a pleasant hedonic tone, maybe increasing our sense of curiosity, honing attention. It may be subtle, maybe fleeting, but that's fine. We don't need it to be any more than what it is. What's pleasant on that out breath? Natural relaxation response, an inherent letting go or releasing, a settling, a contentment. Just notice what are the pleasant flavors on that out breath and the base of the out breath. Notice it. Give yourself permission to feel that. Now you can open up the scope of your awareness to include this full body. Back and front of torso, neck, face, and head. And just allowing your awareness to free float within the body. Like a fish inside of an aquarium, just checking out something over here, noticing something over there. And moment by moment, as you're contacting a sensation, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So we can use that as a labeling set if that'll help concentration. So as I'm free floating, I'll be using those labels, something like this. Unpleasant, pleasant, pleasant. Not sure. Neutral, unpleasant, unpleasant, pleasant, and so on like that. Contact the sensation, label, explore. What's the qualities? What's my natural reaction? Try not to get lost in thought. Pull back from that. Notice when we fall into down the rabbit hole of fantasy planning or daydream. It's a personality view that's forming. You're a self as an actor participating in a story. We pull back from that particular fantasy plan or daydream. At the core of it, was there some sensation or want that was pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? If an idea pops up, and it's pleasant, it's entertaining, is there a craving response that inclines you to then go unconscious into the fantasy? What's it like to refrain from that? Notice, oh, that's pleasant, that's entertaining, and I can let go of that. I can allow myself to feel the pleasantness and let go of it, but not need to fall into craving and wanting to follow that rabbit hole. So we're noticing the pleasant, the unpleasant, the neutral. What's your response to it? Is the pleasant engendering a craving for more? Or can we just appreciate it and let it go? Is the unpleasant creating an aversion, or we're tightening up and turning away? Or can we just be with the unpleasant, have a compassionate response to the discomfort of it, and let it go? Be it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, can we have this overall sense of acceptance, equanimity? Just not preferring it to be anything other than it is. Try to stay consistent with the labeling. Can you let the unpleasant just be unpleasant without needing to do anything about it? Can you just have the capacity to open up, turn towards the unpleasant? Bring that sense of acceptance, equanimity, self compassion towards whatever's unpleasant about it. Not need to build anything, a story off of it. And can we lean into that metta response? If something is pleasant, can we really bring that appreciative joy? The unpleasant with the compassion, the open, accepting equanimity towards all. Can that be a felt flavor too? Can whatever is arising for you naturally, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, can that lean towards a cultivation of this wholesome response? All of it involves an opening up and turning towards, an engaging of the heart, seeing it for what it is clearly, and choosing to cultivate this kindness, openness, acceptance, allowing. And as you notice it arise or at present, can you contact it, appreciate it, which may create another wholesomely pleasant moment that you can appreciate, which creates another wholesomely pleasant moment. Thus creating this positive feedback loop. Can we lean into that? Lean into the cultivation. There's not much wakefulness, joy, acceptance. Well, how can we start to do that? How can we start to cultivate that? And if it's there, how can we sustain that? Keep that positive feedback loop going. Okay, at ease. Post-bell practice, allowing yourself to still be open to receive the merits of what you've been generating, relinquishing the hindrances, cultivating the metta response. So I'd like to hear from you. What did you notice? What did you observe? What was relevant for you in your sit and or any questions, comments about the material we've covered thus far on the four great efforts? Feel free to just unmute yourself and manifest.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. When we talk about hindrances, I'm just curious as to why attachment is not a hindrance. I do know that attachment is spoken throughout Buddhism, but I'm just curious why attachment isn't a hindrance.
Well, I guess to me, my understanding is that there are various mental factors, qualities of mind that arise. And then it's really how we relate to them. So the attachment is a way that we relate to it. So restlessness can arise, and that's a hindrance in and of itself. But the way that I'm relating to it, if I attach to it and then boom, that perpetuates a self-view, then that's like a process. But if the restlessness is there and I'm just closely observing it and leaning into some like shamatha practices that bring a sense of calming and releasing of the urgency around that restlessness, then it tends to go away. So to me, the attachment is, how is it that that's a particular way that I'm relating to a hindrance versus just a mental state itself. It's kind of more of an activity than a mental state. So all these other things are kind of like mental emotional states. The attachment is kind of the way that I'm relating to it. I'm getting hooked as opposed to, releasing. So there's the hooking action, there's the releasing action that happens. So those are kind of different than the mental state itself. Does that seem relevant? Does that seem true to you?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Thank
Excellent
you.
question. Thank you. Anybody else? What happened for you in your sit? What did you notice about cultivating your own response to pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? What did you find about your own wholesome or unwholesome responses?
Well, I'll try to explain what it was like for me. Because I'm in such physical pain,
You had a lot of unpleasant happening, Gail.
I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. And I found it like, it was almost like the pain wasn't unpleasant. It was my reaction to the pain was unpleasant. Like in the beginning, like focusing on the breath, I could feel all this contraction in my body and tension, like trying to ward off the pain, and that was unpleasant. So I tried to focus on not thinking about whether it was pleasant or unpleasant and just kind of settling into just kind of loosening up what was going on in the sensation in my body. It was all like upper chest, and that's where everything hurts, neck, back, whatever. And I found that if I could focus on sort of having this like open spaciousness in my body, then that kind of made the pain real secondary. And that openness was very pleasant. The problem was is staying with that feeling, because then I would drift off into what happens to me sometimes when I go off into what I call like little movies or something. Suddenly my head is like, there's this whole story going on. It's not me. I'm not even in it. It's two people are doing something or whatever. It's like this movie, and then it's like, oh, but there it is again. And then I go back to the focusing on the spaciousness and openness. And it was not an unpleasant sit. It was, much to my surprise, it was like the pain was there, but it wasn't me. I was not the pain, it was just kind of there.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, Gail. Thank you. I'm glad. I know in the beginning you were saying, hey, I might have to bail out, but kudos to you for sticking it out. And
Thanks.
it not just being this kind of exercise of machismo, just riding the mechanical bull, but actually transmuting that experience. So that's a wonderful example right there. You have
Thank
this
you.
discomfort that's there and it's chronic, and it's like just that nerve is just giving those impulses out. And so this is one of the things that we learn. One of the insights we have is that pain and suffering are two separate experiences. Normally, that doesn't make sense to us because we associate the pain and suffering. Once we're aware of the pain, we're aware of the suffering. But it's just on that very subtle preconscious level, we notice the pain, and there's automatically this aversive response. And then that struggle, that's the suffering. So the fact that you're able to tease that apart, oh, this is the pain and this is my reaction to it, that's the suffering. And then how the suffering component began to go, and you're able to, rather than fixate on this localized region of discomfort, but just open up into the spaciousness and appreciate the pleasantness. You are going back and forth between noticing the pleasant and kind of cultivating the wholesome response of the appreciative joy quality of just the open appreciation, and then the anatta piece of the breaking the identification with the negative reactivity. So right there, I mean, I think Gail, you checked the boxes, all the boxes there. You refraining from indulging in or cult stoking the unethical response of aversion, and when it did arise, he would just lean into the anatta. It was not me, it was an activity. And then leaning into cultivating that pleasant abiding, and then being able to remain in it. So then the only thing is, it seemed like once things were like no longer a problem, it's just like, oh, things get a little fuzzy and foggy, and then you went off into entertainment land. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is fine. Let's check out what's on Netflix, Yeah. So maybe it's about, when we get into that pleasant abiding space, to refine the technique of how you're relating to what's taking place. So there's a little bit more tangibility of what to do in that, because that's a common report. It's like, hey, things are great. Okay, I'm going to fall asleep a little bit. So you're like, okay, I'm not going to fall into craving, not going to not fall into aversion, but then the unconscious got you.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it was something kind of comfy, cozy, pleasant within that too. It didn't disrupt.
No, it didn't. And I was just so curious to see how, when we went to sit, how I was going to react. So I think that kind of made it less of a challenge. Like, oh, what am I going to see? What's going to happen here?
Yeah, that curiosity, I think, is a great resource to take with you. I'm glad that you have that. All right. So Gail gave a lesson to everybody. Go into your meditation with that curiosity. And that's right there, the seed of the alchemy, turning the lead to gold. All right. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We might have time for a last one.
I'll say something.
Hey, Jerry.
So the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. It was interesting because we did the sit this morning, and so I had the same experience with my foot, and sitting here now, when we're labeling it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, it was very, very unpleasant. And when we were doing it this morning, it was just expansive or contracting. Yeah. And this morning, it didn't even register as unpleasant. But in this sit, there was like, oh, that is unpleasant. It's still expansive. And that took me by surprise a little bit, for whatever that's worth.
That's interesting. So what Jerry's referring to is, do a morning sit group that you are all invited to. I can put the Zoom link in the chat box at the end. But so we work with various themes and practices throughout the week. And so what we were doing this morning was looking at the expansive and contractive forces within sensation. So Jerry is referring to, I guess, a foot was being crushed. Is that what it is? Like you had another foot on top of it as you're cross-legged type thing, or something along those lines? Something like that. So, if there's a sensation going on, what part of it is expansive that wants to push out, expand into space? A sensation that's going on, what part wants to contract, pull in, collapse among itself? Oftentimes when we are not clear about these sensations, they tend to, congeal together and create pressure. So what Jerry was mentioning, if I understood correctly, is today he was having this experience of this foot discomfort, but because he was working with expansion, contraction focus, it wasn't necessarily an unpleasant experience. But today, when we were looking exclusively directly at the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, there's something that just it seemed like it kind of intensified the unpleasantness of it. Is that what you're saying?
It was clearly unpleasant.
Yeah.
Rather than just something interesting. Like this morning, it was just kind of interesting.
So there's something about the expansion contraction focus that tends to bring a lot of neutrality to things. I'm not entirely sure what it is. Howsoever, my understanding is it's working on such a subtle level. It's like, ouch, my hip hurts. That's unpleasant. And if it's like that's the level of investigation, then it's like it's easy to get stuck on the unpleasantness for sure. If I'm looking at, well, what part wants to expand, what part wants to contract, then that's another level of curiosity of, oh, okay, well, there's unpleasant is not the end of it. There's actually something else going on here. So this another level, we're going another order of magnitude into the sensation. Well, what part wants to push out? What part wants to pull in? Well, there's actually this coronal activity around it that's kind of doing one thing, and at the core is doing something else. And that's another level of curiosity that might bring some kind of pleasant qualities that might neutralize some of the unpleasant qualities. So I noticed that particular focus brings a lot of eventually kind of neutralizes a lot. And also, who knows, it's entirely possible we could have done the same meditation tonight and you might have had a different experience too. That's always a possibility. But yeah, I'm curious. So today it was unpleasant, and what was the response? Was it increasing the aversive response? How were you responding to it?
It was actually just puzzling because I refolded my blanket that I sit on, so I'm a little bit, it generally doesn't really have an unpleasant feeling when I'm sitting like that. And it was just more of a curiosity, and it did start some mental proliferation where I had to like stop and come back to just the experience of feeling tone. Because at that point in the sit, everything else was pretty neutral. In the beginning, there was a lot of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, pleasant, unpleasant. There was like a lot going on, but later in the sit, it was all pretty neutral except for that pressure that was familiar from this morning. So
yeah, it didn't shift or move. Now then, in the latter part of the sit, when I was saying, all right, let's lean into the pleasant cultivation, were you able to cultivate some metta response or equanimity towards it?
Yeah. That was a little bit before, and started with the equanimity and then the metta.
Yeah. I'm curious if we sat for a little longer, if that might have shifted things. If it naturally kind of, that expansion contraction might have taken over a theme on itself because you're primed for it. Or if eventually that kind of metta equanimity might have begun to kind of neutralize that discomfort itself. Or who knows, maybe it's just sitting with the ache. I know something happened for me tonight that happens often. I get into the didactic part beforehand and I say, okay, everybody sit. And then I ring the bell and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't change my posture. I'm in a horrible posture. I have a Charlie horse for the last 5 minutes. I didn't even realize it, but I already rang the bell and my picture's on the screen. I'm not going to be flailing around. So yeah, so I was sitting with a pain in the hip as well. That was just unpleasant the whole time. It didn't shift, change, move in any way, shape, or form, but you know, I was definitely aware of what it was generating or what it wanted to generate as a response. So in the end, I was able to kind of abide in this metta, kindness, joy place, but that freaking hip was still just sending messages of ouch, ouch, ouch the whole time. But it didn't interfere with the sincerity of the smile that I was having too. So, let's see what happens tomorrow with the foot, Jerry.
Yeah. Look forward to it. I'm glad I get to come back tomorrow. I'm still off for another week. So,
all right. Look at you.
Yeah.
Rooting for your foot, Jerry.
Thank you. The morning group is really super supportive, everybody. You should come.
Yeah, I second that. Good group of humans.
Great.
Cool. All right. Well, since that was spoken of, let me put that in the chat. So everybody is welcome to come to the sit. I will put that in the chat. Let me find the appropriate links there to share. Here it is. Okay, so it's morning meditation that happens. It's 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific time each day of the week. We work with a different theme: Metta Monday, Shamatha Tuesday, Insight Wednesday, Meditation on Emotion Thursday, and a Silent Sit Friday. It's a good group of people. We've become quite a good mutual support group as we're going through this beast called 2020. Short of, you know what, I'm not going to tempt the fates, but let's hope that it continues to 2021. Also, as we are winding down for the evening, thank you everybody for coming out. Just want to put also a link to donate. I know that many of you have gone through the Insight LA site and have pre-registered for the class, paid for the class that way, and we appreciate that fully. I'd like to say that the teachings of the Dharma are offered freely, and nobody will ever be turned away by lack of funds. However, if you have the ability, the capacity to donate a little bit, that'll help kind of offset the costs for those that cannot. And it will definitely help keep Insight LA going. You know, it's times of a lot of economic instability, and the organization is definitely subject to it. So this is another way that we can practice in community, practice generosity within community, creating the conditions so the community continues to flourish till tomorrow.
Mike, is there a meeting ID number or just a password for the morning sit?
This is a good question. Let's take a look. Okay, so morning meditation, Zoom meeting password. So that ID number.
I don't think there's a password.
You never had a password? So like the meeting ID number, I guess it's like there's the thing that says web.zoom.us and then // I think that set of numbers afterwards is the meeting ID number, I believe. So it would be 630618008. That's my guess of it. Yeah. So you're asking because the link might not be sufficient. You prefer to just kind of look it up by
I don't see a link. I don't see a link.
Oh, in the chat box?
Yeah, I don't see it.
Oh, okay.
I just see password. Let me see, maybe I need to go up.
Yeah,
No,
scroll up a little bit.
I don't see a link. I'll go up further. Oh, way up there.
Way up there.
But I can't, what do I do with it?
Oh, well, you can copy, paste it. You can copy this and paste it. Maybe I can also put it into the Google Classroom as well.
That would be good. That would be helpful.
Seems like
I lose track of all these things and I never know where to go to find you.
Also click on the 3 little dots and it will save the chat to your computer.
Oh,
You see the 3 little dots next to the file?
yeah, save chat. Look
Yeah.
at that.
Uh-huh.
Nice one, Colette.
Go to a lot of Zoom meetings.
Yeah, right. Crowdsourcing our Zoom intelligence here. Okay, everybody, let's end on a dedication of merit. By the merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain an awakening for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those who have come before us on the path, and to those who will come after us on the path. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate all of you. Have yourselves a wonderful week. Let me also, if anybody has any questions that they didn't feel comfortable stating out loud to everybody else, let me give my contact information. Feel free to reach out with an email at a time of your convenience if you'd like to ask a question or check in on anything. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you all next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Take care.
you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Mhm.